Everyone, in a previous video, how to use a spider, someone asked me, can you do something about the grasshopper? And this video is exactly that. So, how to use the grasshopper. Both spiders and grasshoppers are considered the least powerful pieces in Hive by most players, but it's crucial to know how to use them properly if you want to win. The difference between the grasshopper and the spider is pretty similar to the one between the bishop and the knight in chess. So they kind of a similar value, but they use in different situations. In chess, the bishop is very strong in an open position, and it's a long range piece, while the knight is a short range piece and it's useful in a situation where the game is closed. In Hive, something similar happened, and the grasshopper is very useful long range to jump over other pieces, while the spider is particularly useful in a short range, and they can move around the hive, but it cannot pass through gates, for example, while the grasshopper can jump over them. So the first thing to understand is that the hopper is more powerful the more pieces there are in play, because more pieces surrounding the hopper means more option to move, which means that they become usually more powerful as the game goes on, not much in the opening. An important exception is the first piece. So the grasshopper is quite used as first piece after the ladybug. Many beginners think that actually the spider would be a better choice because you just sacrifice the weakest piece and you keep your more valuable pieces for later. But this is not entirely true. Of course, spider is still playable, but it's way more common to use a grasshopper or a ladybug. So in a situation like this one, where there is a trigger spot here and trigger spot here, if black plays here, the grasshopper is free to move now. If it was a spider, this wouldn't be able to move. So it's important that the first piece is able to jump over. Apart from the first move, in the opening, actually the spider is more useful than a grasshopper, simply because the spider can reach quickly the opponent army when the hive is still small, and the grasshopper doesn't have many options, usually only one or maximum two, because there are not many pieces in play. So it's quite common to keep a grasshopper for a later stage of the game, where you know already where it's gonna go, when you have a more specific goal in mind. So even at the very beginning of the game, the spider can easily reach an opponent piece, so pin the queen, for example. Of course, there are ways to defend, but the point is that instead playing in a grasshopper, it allows to probably get into the skill spot, but this can also be easily defended from, and the grasshopper doesn't have many other options. It can only go here, for example. So an exception comes when a more valuable opponent piece can be targeted by a grasshopper. So in that case, placing a grasshopper can save us a tempo, which means that the opponent piece, usually an ant or a beetle, will have to move, and then we have basically an extra move, having placed the grasshopper for free. For example, in this case, normally you will recommend for black to play ants and the mosquito, or even a spider. But if we place a grasshopper here, this seems playable in this case. Why? Because we are threatening to pin the white ant. And since white cannot allow this exchange, would be unfavorable for them, then white has to move the ant or defend somehow. If white defends just placing a pillbug here, fine, we have an extra hopper for later. We just keep playing normally, right? We'll place an ant or whatever our plan is, and we have basically an extra hopper in play. Or even better, if the white pins the hopper and now we place an ant, in this case, for example, this mosquito won't be able to move as an ant, so it cannot pin the black ant, but the ant could pin the ant itself, right? But even if this happened, compare the situation with if I had placed the ant straight away here, we reach the same position, but in the one that I showed you before, the grasshopper is already here. So basically black has got an extra move. and now you can keep it in the same position, but the grasshopper is already in play, and white has actually wasted the move. So in this case, it's possible to do it. But the most important use of the grasshopper, of course, is reaching spaces that cannot be reached otherwise because of gates. So because of the freedom to move rule, spiders or ants cannot move through gates, and it's a very common defensive tool. However, grasshopper are not restricted by the freedom to move rule, and therefore can jump over a line of pieces and reach spaces protected by gates. Especially in the final stage of the game, where you are very close to surround all 6 pieces, using a grasshopper will give you definitely an advantage. Also, given the fact that you have 3 grasshoppers, you can use all 3 to attack specifically one place, and your opponent needs to have 3 different ants to block all your attacks. This is typically called hopper rain. You just throw your hoppers around until your opponent gives up. So this is a good example. It's a game I played against Simon, a Hungarian talented young player, and I was playing white, and I'm clearly in trouble here. My queen is almost surrounded. My queen, the opponent queen is here, but I'm very behind in the attack, and it's black turn now. So the problem is that this space is covered by a gate, so the black ant cannot get in here, and the beetle will not be able to reach here, because otherwise the pillbug below will just run away. And the right idea is to use grasshoppers, of course. Since black still has 2 grasshoppers in reserve, he decides to play grasshopper here with the idea of getting here and then winning the next move. The problem is now that if I decide to pin the hopper, then another hopper will come in, and then there's no way for me to stop it from coming here and winning and losing. Well, he will be winning. So what I did instead is just to place another ant, and once the hopper comes here, I try to pin it. So I cannot leave the spawn point to black, otherwise the last grasshopper will come in play. Unfortunately, this pin is not very effective, because the ant can just fill the elbow and free the grasshopper, and now the grasshopper can easily get into here and winning. So this is an example how to use a grasshopper successfully in the middle game. Speaking of attacking techniques, the hoppers can also be used in what we call rearrangement. So if the final kill spot, if the final spot you need to fill cannot be reached by one of your pieces, and a grasshopper is already surrounding the enemy queen, you can rearrange the pieces around the enemy queen in order to create a good angle of attack for another of your pieces. And the grasshopper is quite useful in this case, because they can just move from one space to another one, still next to the opponent queen, and in some cases you can even triangulate around the queen and just allow another of your pieces to take the kill shot and win. This is an easy example of rearrangement. So white needs to fill this kill spot, but unfortunately it cannot reach it using other pieces. So grasshopper doesn't have any good angle of attack. I cannot place grasshopper anywhere useful. Well, it could go here, but then it would be pinned by black ant probably. And the beetle cannot move here, because then Mosquito will just recover it, and now white is not winning anymore. But there is an easy solution. The solution is you rearrange the grasshopper from one side to the other side of the queen, and now the beetle can easily get down and win. And there's no way for black to prevent that. Of course, you can do this with the other pieces as well, with an ant, for example, but the grasshopper can always jump across the queen. The ants can be blocked many times, so it's a good thing to keep in mind. Another typical use, as happened for the spider, in the middle game is the so-called pin replacement. So we use a piece, usually a spider or a grasshopper, to replace the pin made by an ant in order to free the ant and use it somewhere else. There are pros and cons compared to a spider pin replacement. So the main advantage is that it cannot be blocked by other pieces, as would happen here with a spider. And the grasshopper can still be useful if the angle of attack is good later on in the game. So it's replacing the pin, but also can potentially come back into play later. The main disadvantage is that typically a grasshopper that performs a pin replacement doesn't have any other function, while a spider can be sometimes used to perform a double threat, a sort of a fork, and it can create more issues to your opponent. For instance here, if white wants to make a pin replacement on this ant to free the mosquito, if he uses the spider, then the black spider will just block here, and white is not able to actually replace the pin. But if white use a hopper, then the spider will pin the mosquito temporarily, and then the grasshopper moves in, and now the white mosquito is free. Also, a hopper can be used actually to prevent pin replacement or to make it less effective. So for instance here, white again wants to replace the pin on the ant with the mosquito, and use a spider. Black doesn't want to pin the spider using the mosquito, because that would be downgrading basically the mosquito to a spider. So what black can do is just to place a hopper, and then after the pin replacement the hopper can jump over, and now the pin replacement is not really effective anymore because he has not replaced anything. The mosquito who was supposed to be free is not free anymore. Okay. The last two ideas. So the first one is that you can use grasshopper to deviate the attack of some other pieces, typically an opponent's spider. For instance, if the spider here threatens to pin the black queen, there are a number of ways to defend, but the most common is simply to place a pillbug or a grasshopper here. The spider can only pin in this position, so in a false pin, and then this is a trigger point. Whenever your opponent tries to fill the space, the grasshopper can jump away. So if you have a situation like this, this is not recommended, of course, for white, because black will just jump out and he frees a space around the queen, so he's defending, and at the same time he pins both pieces, spider and ant. Another defensive idea is the so-called anti-spawn setup. So if you sandwich your queen in between two defensive pieces, and one of these could be the grasshopper, then you avoid that an opponent beetle would create some direct drops around the queen. So your opponent cannot place a piece directly from the reserve to a kill spot. Even if the beetle reaches the queen and is covering the queen, all the spaces here are controlled by the grasshopper. Well, in this case also by the ants, but the ants are here because there is a grasshopper. So the beetles are not so scary anymore, and white cannot place pieces directly from the reserve. And this maneuver has costed white quite a lot of moves. So simply placing a grasshopper, or it's more common a pillbug, but the point of the grasshopper is that eventually it can also attack in this space. So the grasshopper is actually in a good angle of attack in many cases. And finally, last but not least, remember that you also have a mosquito that can copy the grasshopper movement. And since the grasshopper movement is quite unique, having a mosquito next to grasshopper in some cases can help you to convert the mosquito into another piece that you wouldn't be able to do otherwise. So keep that option in mind as well. Okay, this is it. Let me know if you enjoyed the video, and let me know in the comments what's the next piece do you want me to talk about, and see you around on hivegame.com. Maybe you can challenge me for a blitz game, or another video. Ciao.